4.1.1, identify the procedure appropriate for solving a problem. So we're going to have a certain problem. What is the procedure? What is the step-by-step process by which we solve it? What we'll do is something like this, an average. Inputting 3 numbers and finding out what their average is. So the procedure in pseudocode, which I'll put behind comments like this, would be something like so taking that number into the program itself. And put a bunch of numbers. And right, so you know how to do an average. And then probably the last thing we would do is we would output. So that's the procedure, step by step, in pseudocode, just in English behind comments that will not be read by the computer. So now let's do it in Java. So the first thing we're going to need for pretty well all our programs, might as well get this out of the way right now. If you type BReader and then tab, you get this crazy line. And it gives you a little caution over here, so you click on it, take the first option that comes up, and do that one more time. And there's no need to know what all this means yet. You just need to know that this will help us type in numbers in this case, which will be, they go into the program. The program can work with them. So the next thing is this SOUT tab gives you this line, which prints out in the console in our NetBeans stuff, whatever we want to print out. So we're going to print out what is the first number. We're going to take it in. And we're going to take it in as a certain type of data, and that type of data we're going to use for this case is float. If I just do a decimal number, dot, right? I could also do dot, same number. Well, it's not the same number, but here, I'll make it the same number. I can make this the same number and just float the decimal some other place. And to the computer, the only difference is where the decimal plate has floated to. So anyway, floats are one real number data type. So float, we'll call it number 1. More on this later, but I'll explain it shortly. Alright. A lot of stuff up here that's probably mildly confusing at this point, but it's the same basic stuff that we're going to be doing over and 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 over again. This is the line or the statement for reading in stuff that the user will type. They'll type 5, they'll type 7, they'll type 10, and this will read it in. But what read line reads in is letters. Now, 5 can be a letter, right? It's on the keyboard. The 1 and the 0 can be letters on the keyboard. But we want them to be treated not as letters, but as numbers. In fact, as floating decimal point numbers. So to change the strings, which are basically what are being typed here, strings of letters, into a float data type, we do this float.parseFloat. And again, we'll do it over and over and over again, so don't worry if even now it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to you. So we will now have number 1 entered into the computer. And we'll just do this a couple more times to average up 3 numbers. And we'll change this to read a little bit better. And the other thing we're going to have to do is change the variable name. We can't have a variable called number 1 and then another variable called number 1, because if we do something with number 1, well, which number 1, right? We can't have 2 or more variables the same name. So let's change these variable names to be a bit more appropriate anyway. And now what does our procedure say? If we've asked for taking a number, repeat this certain number of times, add those numbers together. So let's say the float average, we'll call it average, that's our identifier, variable name will be equal to, that's numbers added together, 1 plus 2, number 3. That has to happen first before we do the division, so we just can't go divide by 3. That won't give us a syntax error, but that's not logically correct, because you know with order of operations that multiplication and division happens first. Well, it's the same here as it is in mathematics, that will happen first, and then those two will be added, and that will give us the wrong answer. We set up here that we need to add the numbers together first. Procedurally, this happens before the division, so we force that to happen first, just like you do in math with parentheses. So now we have this calculated average based on numbers typed in by the user. So our last step in the procedure is to output that average. Is, and then we add on the variable. Do note that this variable outside of the double quotes is this thing. It's this answer, this number, this floating point number. Whereas this average, it's just words we're printing out, like down here. Like here I changed it to be, you might wonder what that was all about, to show you that I can change this. That can be whatever, because it's in double quotes. So we'll run this program. What is the first number? Let's do some other numbers. Let's do 2 and 4 and not 6, which would give us 4. Let's do 7, which would be a little bit more than 4. Enter, and there you go. That is a procedure in human English words. This is the same procedure, vetted out as it were, done in Java.